Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Wednesday, October 29th, the year of our Lord 2025. Happy Halloween week to all of you out there. Hope everything's going well when your neck of the woods certainly is in mine. Good day yesterday, good day today. Um, yeah, good day today. Bad day yesterday for me that turned good. I got a text from an old friend that lifted my spirits. So you know how that always goes. That's always a good thing. Um, God is good sometimes. I'll just leave it at that. Gamecocks play Ole Miss this weekend. Beamer had his press conference yesterday. Shane Beamer. Very interesting comments from the players about the offense, simplifying, condensing things. Beamer, I guess, reinforced some of the things I've been saying, or we've been saying across all shows and on thebigspur.com and places like that. That talked about the openers, meaning the first drives of the game, because we've all been sitting here thinking, and I know I've heard from all of you as well. You're a bunch of smart fans. Uh, that why are they so good on first drives? And then it just goes to crap. And Beamer kind of alluded to it without coming out and saying it, that there was kind of a disconnect with not going back to things they do well. Coming out and kind of shooting your shot, and then you don't have any bullets left in the chamber, arrows in the quiver. And my theory continues to be that because Mike Shula, NFL play caller, right? Um, in the NFL, you don't. That's how you do it. You kind of just have a bunch of plays. I think Shane mentioned 100 or so, and then you just try other things. And then because in that league they adjust quick, and everybody's really talented, and you can't sit there and do the same thing over and over. College is much more run it till they stop it, and then run it again out of different formations until they stop it, and then run something off of that. That, in other words, like you're picking on a corner, you're throwing to the left or whatever. And I'm going to try to do this because I'm not a coach, but and you're lighting up this one guy, and then they kind of adjust, and maybe they move over and try to double him or bracket him. Well, then there's probably somebody wide open. You fake it one way and go the other. It sounds simple, but in the NFL, I understand why you can't. And so I think that's kind of what's been going on with the calls and how the game flow's gone. And it was much better against Alabama. And broadly on this, these things with the offense and all, these are all short-term fixes. We're going to get into the long-term fixes, because there is a long-term fix, and contacts have indicated that long-term fixes for the offensive side of the ball are coming. I don't know what, I don't know who. We have the Gamecock smorgasbord. I like that word, smorgasbord, every Thursday with Alex Jones. And there's a smorgasbord of options out there for college offense, probably more so this year, with all the coaching changes happening in college football and all that good stuff. It's probably not the best year to go head coach shopping if you're a program. I don't even think LSU, best job in the country, in my opinion, is going to have their pick of the litter. I think they'll probably end up with a surprising name. I think the odds right now, if you look at the betting markets, bet.us says John Summerall from Tulane. That'd be kind of interesting, hiring the Tulane head coach to coach LSU. That's an old rivalry that is defunct now. That's what would have happened to Tennessee Vanderbilt if Vanderbilt had ended up leaving the SEC back when Tulane did, an academic school. But that used to be a game they played every year in Louisiana, for years. It was their Clemson. So that'd be kind of a little weird, but Tulane's obviously at a different level of football now in the group of five, but John Summerall, so it's, LSU's AD likes to go big game hunting, big names, I think that's been costly for him, with about $125 million worth of buyouts for Jimbo Fisher and Brian Kelly. And so my point of all this as it relates to the Gamecocks is what was the primary issue with Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M? his offense didn't work. His offense, it's a pro style scheme, kind of antiquated. You saw the signs at Florida State late in his tenure. He gets to A&M. He has Haynes King. Now he was right by starting Haynes King because Haynes King's a hell of a player. But asking Haynes King, like Lenora Sellers, to go out and make all these reads and do what Jimbo wanted him to do was a challenge. It's not Haynes King's game. It's not Lenore Sellers' game right now either. Lenore Sellers looks a lot like a rookie quarterback. Looks like Caleb Williams did last year for the Bears, and whenever quarterbacks go to that level, the learning curve is there because of the speed of the game and all that stuff, but also the process, what you have to do to learn that style of football. Same sport, different game. I've said that for a long, long time. So if you're wondering about Lenoris in the NFL, I think the NFL guys are probably looking at going, hey, he's made progress. So, uh, which is crazy to think about because we're all sitting there going, well, look at the numbers and look at how they play and all that. But, I do think he's made progress as a passer. Um, he was a little off against Alabama accuracy wise. He's normally not that inaccurate, but still, he's done some things just granularly that we don't notice that I think his pro career is going to be fine. And he'll probably be better for it, just like Spencer Rattler was. Like the one of the good things that happened to Rattler that got him ready for that league was the Marcus Satterfield experiment. You don't know it. It's frustrating for us, but it helps him. And then kind of like I've always said, going back to the Muschamp era, it's not the responsibility. You go win games and you play well, the NFL is going to take care of itself. Um, the NFL also, like I said, will find if you're not winning games and doing well, they evaluate different ways. But so looking at it like that, what got Brian Kelly and Jimbo Fisher in trouble? Uh, Offense. Brian Kelly lost his guy, Mike Denbrock. He went back to Notre Dame. Denbrock was the OC when Daniels was there and he won the Heisman. He goes back to Notre Dame to work for Marcus Freeman. They're rolling on offense and replaced him with Joe Sloan. And then they had Alex Atkins, who got fired at Florida State calling the run game. And now Atkins is the OC. They got rid of Sloan. So offense sort of did them in, right? They fixed their defense at LSU and all of a sudden the offense was struggling. Same with Jimbo Fisher. So that $125 million is another example of why you have to be long-term good on offense. And as far as coordinators go, I think that it's probably not a good year to go head coach shopping, like I said, but I think it's a good year to go assistant coach shopping because there's going to be a lot of movement. I mean, honestly, you could really be fortunate with somebody because you may have a really good coordinator that's happy where he's at. I don't know where, but happy where he's at. And then all of a sudden, the new coach comes in and he's got a different philosophy, and that guy's out and needs a job. So it's one of those things where it lines up pretty well. Making the right decision, obviously, is going to be important. I think chances are, just to be honest, as long as it's not a similar background to the last three, I think I'll be fine with it. I'll get behind it. I'll give anybody a chance, or really, really not the last three. Everybody except Mike Bobo, since Muschamp got there, Roper, McClendon, although McClendon had a good offense one year when he listened to some other folks. Guys like that, you know, let's go in a different direction outside of what, a college guy like Mike Bobo with a proven track record. I'll be happy. But chances are, whoever comes in is going to have a lot of scrutiny because people are just sick of seeing bad offense and bad offensive process and all that. And it's coming out that that was the issue. Your players have said it. Beamer's alluded to it. So hopefully they fixed it. But chances are it's going to be somebody, half the fan base is going to wonder why, and then half the other fan. And then even if you get a big name, as we've seen around the country, sometimes it just doesn't work out. Uh, One thing I'll just say this as an aside, and I said this is going to be a short-term conversation, but I guess a little bit of long-term here. I love what Indiana does on offense. Because I kind of wondered, like, how are they so good? Because I mean, they do have talented players. They obviously evaluate very well, and Fernando Mendoza is a winner. Did a great job at Cal, and now I don't know how Cal ends up getting all these good quarterbacks. Their freshman quarterback out there's pretty good too. But Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, and the list goes on and on. But Mendoza's a great quarterback. But I did some research. Like, what are they doing? And they have a heavy RPO offense. It's run pass option that's designed to consistently put the defense in conflict. I love that. RPOs are very popular in pros, college, you name it, high school. But what they do is go heavy, a little bit of tempo, and and they run it perfectly, and that's why they're good on offense. And then their defense is just tough as nails. I mean, I was probably wrong about Indiana, and I think they're better this year than last year. I think this is a better team. I think Mendoza's better than Roark was last season, and last year they didn't go to Oregon and win. They're beating the crap out of not so good teams, but I mean, beating UCLA 56-6 a few weeks ago, that would have looked, like what we expected. Well, UCLA's been pretty hot, and not anymore. Not after playing the Hoosiers. So my God, they're good. So I love that kind of thing. It would be kind of something I would get behind. Before you say, well, can they go get Mike Shanahan? And he's not related to the other Shanahans, that Kyle and Mike, the Big Mike Shanahan. That sounds like an Irish car parts dealer. I guess I'm thinking about Big Tom Callahan from Tommy Boy. Big Mike Shanahan. Go see Big Mike Shanahan. Get you a muffler. But Shanahan up there, I mean, I don't know if Carolina can go get him. He's a Signetti guy. But something like that to me would be ideal at the University of South Carolina. And it also, is one that any quarterback can run. It fits. You look down the road, Cutter Woods, Landon Duckworth, guys like that. So, that's just a thought that I had as I have my red Indiana Hoosiers colored beanie on here today. It just popped in my mind. But short term, because you got 4 more games to play. And look, I don't know if Carolina can win at Ole Miss. I think it's, they're obviously underdogs. They're obviously going to be underdogs at A&M, maybe underdogs against Clemson. There's still that thing up at Clemson where, you see it, you see what's happening to them, but you don't really believe it. And they've got a good football team coming in, and Duke's Manny Diaz has continued to do a pretty good job there. Building on what Mike Elko built. They've got a good quarterback. But, I mean, you just kind of think Clemson should beat Duke this weekend. I mean, to me, there's no question about it. I mean, it's one of those things where, they should win the dang game. They're at home. They've got more talent than Duke, that kind of thing. It's an 11 a.m. kickoff, but they got Duke. Florida State's gone in the tank. They're at Louisville. You could see a world where they're sitting there at 7-4 coming in, and Carolina's maybe 4-7, hopefully not 3-8. But you could see a world where that would happen. They always tend to turn it around, and they don't have to go play Ole Miss and A&M. And someone actually made a mistake of reading the comments the other day. Mentioned that I was being smug when I was talking about the ACC. I'm not. I'm just, and they said, well, Carolina be 500 in the ACC. Probably, with the way they've elected to run offense through 7 games until the other night. I mean, you got problems like that holding you back. You lose to anybody. This team got 253 yards against South Carolina State. But that said, When you go, it's probably not so much that as it is when you go to fix it. It's a whole different level fixing it against Duke or a Florida State team that's struggling at home, or somebody like that, than it is Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Alabama, LSU, Missouri, whoever Carolina's played this year. So I wasn't necessarily trying to be smug and saying, well, it's an old tired adage. If Carolina was in the ACC, they'd be winning champion. Well, I don't know if Carolina get the players they get if they're in the ACC, and the ACC team tends to take good programs and drag the mediocrity out of them. And that's not being smug. That's just a fact. Look at that league. Georgia Tech, Virginia, Pitt, Louisville, SMU, Duke, Miami. They're all the top teams in the league with 0 or 1 losses. Wake Forest is going to a bowl. And that's the sign that it's kind of like, even Stanford and Cal have multiple wins. North Carolina, Florida State, Boston College, 3 schools that have been good at the sport of football through the years. 0-3, 0-4, 0-5. So I'm just stating facts about the ACC. I'm not trying. This is not a Clemson Carolina thing. This is not a hypothetical thing. Just to make that clear about that. I agree that this year's Carolina team on offense leaves a lot to be desired. But I still think it's a lot easier to turn your season around against Duke and a Florida State team that hadn't won an ACC game at all in a minute than maybe it is against Texas A&M and Ole Miss. That was just a thought that I had. But Clemson could come into the game as a favorite as well. So I don't know. I don't know if Carolina can win. I do know this. I think Ole Miss has played a lot of close games. They've won most of those. The one loss was kind of a collapse on defense at Georgia. Georgia had 510 yards of offense and won 43-35, but that's in Athens, Georgia. And last time I checked, the only school outside of University of Alabama to win there this decade is nobody. And the last team before that to win in Athens was Carolina in 2019 in that double overtime game. So that's not easy. It's not easy to go in there and get a win. I think it's a little less of a uphill climb to go to Oklahoma and win, and Kentucky and win like Ole Miss has done. But this game's at Ole Miss. They got the Saturday night thing, so their fans should be happy. And they'll be ready and fired up for the game. And so short term, Carolina, I don't know that it's realistic in this one. Just like with Alabama, and Ole Miss statistically has been better than Bama on offense. I think they have similar situations. I think Chambliss is a better runner, makes more plays with his legs than Ty Simpson, but he's Ty's a pretty mobile quarterback too, as we found out the other day. I think that their scheme is equally as good, play calling wise. Obviously, Lane Kiffin, all that's different type of deal. It's much more like there's elements of Spurrier's fun and gun in it. And it's a challenge for the Gamecock defense, especially on the road against these guys. And on the road, Carolina's defense has not necessarily been as good as it's been at home, especially against the run. LSU couldn't run the ball against anybody. And they ran pretty well against the Gamecocks, and Missouri was a debacle, as far as that goes. So, Gamecocks got to tighten up on the road to have a chance to win Saturday night. But back to the offense, and Beamer did confirm, well, what we did last week, we got to do this week as far as the plays and, the play calling and stuff. I think they found something to build on with that. And previously, when all you heard was execution, we're player two away, it just didn't do much to inspire faith. And then you hear the players and Beamer come out and say, well, this is what happened. So hopefully they go have the same kind of plan of attack. That doesn't guarantee they're going to have a good night. You're on the road in the SEC. That's the bottom line. Things can snowball on you quick. I think it would behoove the offense to finish in the red zone, get some confidence, score some touchdowns. And the Ole Miss defense does give up points and yards. It's not a they're good, don't get me wrong, but it's not the dominant defense they had last year. Now Beamer said in the press conference it's a better Ole Miss team than last year. I think it is across the board. And as far as last year's Ole Miss team, you had some games where they didn't score a whole lot, um, low scoring. You're used to Kiffin and that offense putting up big points, big scores. They've done that this year for the most part in the 30s. 20 down 26 loss last year at LSU was brutally heartbreaking. Didn't score enough. Mississippi State game at the end, they kind of heed and hawed around and ended up winning, but it wasn't something that inspired confidence. And you had Jackson Dart and all those great receivers and depth at running back and all this stuff. They did light Arkansas on fire, but this year's team scoring against everybody. And like Beamer said, you know what that Oklahoma defense is all about. I still think it's a Kiffin versus Venables thing, um, in theory, right? But Kiffin did a good job of in the first half last year. And that's another example. Last year, Ole Miss Carolina, they get up 24-3. They just kind of bled it out. That was more of a bleeded out team. This year's team scores and scores and scores. And it's been close. But I do think as far as a team goes, probably not better. You know, you don't have Walter Nolan in there at D tackle, who was obviously a stud, but they do have a better team, and I think that's part of that program handling success and learning how to win. And hats off to Lane Kiffin for doing that. So, how's the offense going to score enough points Saturday night? Because I don't think the defense is going to go in there and shut them completely down, barring a bad game by Ole Miss, and that does happen as we've seen. Well, Beamer mentioned different tempos. Now, some people may have collectively groaned about that because when you're struggling on offense, and Beamer did mention this, sometimes just going fast helps. You stop thinking and start playing, and then you see the talent. But I agree with him too about not going fast all the time. And why, may you ask? Do you ask to not go fast all the time? Well, because Steve Spurrier didn't go fast all the time. That's my simple answer on it, and it worked. I mean, think about all those Clemson games when they were playing Chad Morris led offenses. Tigers were a really good team at the time. They couldn't beat Carolina or sometimes Florida State, but they could certainly beat other teams, Ohio State, LSU, Georgia during that period. But what he would do, he had Connor Shaw and one game Dylan Thompson. Carolina would consciously slow it down, and the time of possession was out of control in those games. And Clemson couldn't beat them because Carolina played good defense and they were getting stops, and it snowballs on you if that happens. So I like having 3 gears, 2 or 3 gears in the offense, and so I agree with Beamer there that there's times you got to do one or the other, but you do need to use it. And I think on the road, especially if they're struggling to stop what you're doing, you know, nothing, you know, I think long drives like the one Alabama had the other night does take the crowd out of it better. But there's nothing more disheartening than when they score and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 the other team goes right down the field, especially early in the football game. Early in the football game, spreading it out has to continue. Um, Gamecocks did a better job of that. I wouldn't mind seeing more. It's just so counterproductive. I talked about RPO game earlier. RPO is all about the box, right? The box is everything in college football, and you're bringing 9 people into the box and trying to run the ball. It's just putting too much on not only your offensive line, but every blocker, tight ends, running backs, everybody. There's too many bodies, and there's not enough space for the backs to operate. So they need to continue to spread it out, get Lenoris out of the pocket. Um, Again, this team's probably on defense. They got good pass rushers. Don't get me wrong, they really do. So the offensive line is going to have to take an even bigger step forward. And we've seen improvement since Sean Elliott's taken over. but get him out of the pocket, get him on the move, give him room to adjust and throw down the field. That's going to be very paramount. Taylor Green from Arkansas had a really good game against these guys, by the way. John Mateer, not so much, but I don't know how healthy he is, folks. I just don't. That hand surgery was on his throwing, and he's even against Carolina, he wasn't after the first half wasn't all that accurate. So and Lenore Sellers has to be more accurate than he was against Bama, and hopefully he will be. He's normally a pretty accurate passer when he gets it off. Um, on defense, I mean, well, I'll stick with offense in a second. They're playing another odd front team. Pete Golding, obviously coach for Nick Saban at Alabama. They'll run four down, three down, that kind of thing. Some different stuff. Now, what they're not is they're not necessarily a blitz and pressure team, but obviously Carolina struggled with that this year. So defensive coordinators aren't dumb. Even Kentucky blitz more than they normally do, and it's a similar scheme on defense. So they may sit back a little bit. They may do the Illinois plan. Uh, and if that's the case, you can't let them get pressure with three or four. Lenore's has to hit the open guy, and they have to dial it up correctly. So, I think that a good sign there would be that against Alabama, running backs and tight ends combined for 11 receptions, 109 yards. Brady Hunt was a key target. Jordan Dingle had a big pass. Faison and Fuller caught a bunch of passes in the game. And then Oscar Attaway, of course, is very skilled at catching the passes out of the backfield and stuff. And it looked like they had more options to do that within the scheme of things, although, Beamer did say last week before the game that they had a hot route or whatever every week. Well, we saw it against Alabama more frequently. So I think what they got to do is just don't revert. Mike Shula, those folks, don't revert to what you were doing. Consider the Alabama game, the opener of the season. You know how sometimes the opener's a little clunky, and then you get better that next week. This needs to be like a game two in a season. It's a new day, and the players are saying it, and Jaden Sellers and Faison. It seems like they're confident in that. That's important. And like I said, it's not like Ole Miss has been dominant on defense. Now, they've played teams that haven't been dominant on defense and not done much. So it is what it is. But as far as the short-term aspect of it, build on what you're doing, keep the creativity in the run game. I'll say this too, and I've been a little bit defensive about the running backs this year, just because they haven't had a lot of room. Yeah, but I do think there's more they could be doing, in the run game. There were some holes the other day against Alabama that you just kind of hope maybe Faison makes somebody miss, gets that extra few yards, or Fuller does as well. I still wouldn't mind seeing Jawan Howell. Attaway's still in that mix. I don't know where Isaiah Gustav is, but I think they do need more production from those guys when they have the opportunity. Slamming them up the middle like that's probably not going to work. And Faison's been playing. He's had some big plays if you think about it, the last 3 weeks: LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama. He probably had the best offensive play on the fullback dive against Oklahoma that we've seen, that we saw in that game. So if you're Carolina, Brady Hunt needs to continue to produce at tight end. He's had a good little mini run here, and then they got Dingle. So I think just build on what you're doing. Jaden Sellers obviously has become a pretty good target for his brother. Donovan Murph played a good game the other day as well. Nick Harbor obviously is a weapon deep. So the Carolina's got players if they just can get the ball in their hands. It's easier said than done sometimes, and it goes beyond play calling and execution. Sometimes you just don't throw a good pass if you're Sellers, and they need to get Sellers' feet going. Ole Miss is not. I'll give you an example in that Georgia game. Georgia ran it with their running backs against this bunch. But Gunner Stockton, 10 carries, 59 yards. Taylor Green had over 100 yards on the ground for Arkansas. They have not always stopped the dual threat guy. And Sellers has, he needs to play with his hair on fire like he did up at Clemson in that game last year, and get yards with his feet and his arm. 289 total yards last week. You can repeat that and get some help from the backs. You can have a good day on offense. And Carolina's going to have to. You got there and turn it over. You don't score in the red zone. Just like against Alabama, eventually, the defense, you can't say enough about that Alabama performance, but eventually Ole Miss is going to score at home. It's just, they're just too good. So you got to get that done. And defensively, we talked about that. You have to tackling and run D, because we all think about Ole Miss, dual threat quarterback, he'll eat you alive with rushing yards, but Lacey in the backfield's unbelievable. He's the toughest back Carolina's faced since Missouri. Let me back up. McGowan from Kentucky is really good, but so maybe not. Maybe Lacey and McGowan are kind of similar, but Lacey can hurt you, and that's the thing too. Just kind of like Steve Spurrier's offenses, Lane Kiffin's very balanced. They run the football. Carolina struggled to stop the run against them last year, so you absolutely have to tackle and lock in on the road better than you have been to win it. And then coverage, coming off the best game of the year for the secondary. Ole Miss's receivers, talent-wise, top to bottom, they may not be as experienced and proven as Alabama's, but they're just as good. And Chambliss delivers a beautiful ball. Carolina against dual threat quarterbacks this year, defensively, they've been okay. Pavia got his yards. Pribula hurt him on the ground a little in a bad tackling game. Drones, they held him in check. Nussmeier, you play him a little different, I think. And Mateer didn't go very far on the ground. So Carolina's done a good job of keeping them in check. Could it be better? Yes. Ole Miss, with all that you have to stop in the pass game and then the running back and all that, that's going to be problematic. So watch that as a key on Saturday night. But yeah, short term, that's what needs to happen offensively. And we mentioned long term as well. The fixes, so to speak, for the Carolina offense, 2025 and beyond. All right, it's a big day on the Chief Sports Network because it's Wide Open Wednesday. The chat box will be wide open for the show. The morning show, we got Mike Morgan back from Charlotte. Hoops, probably talk a little basketball. Today, you've got John Whittle on All Things, who was in Greensboro, probably basketball discussion there as well. Rob Williams from SEC Sunday Night is in. And then maybe some other special guests. I think keep an eye on it. JB's going to have some pretty solid guests in the near future there. Always does. And then Phil and I, the Mad Dog, will be answering all your questions in the Nana Sports chat box on the show. Tailgate Talks. I'd be surprised if it wasn't G.A. Mangus as the guest. It kind of gave it away. I think that picture maybe even from the Big Spur or one that we've used before. It's up and ready to go. I say that because I have not looked to confirm completely that it's GA, but I'm pretty sure it's GA. As the guest there, Sports Talk tonight, streaming live from 6 to 8. And then Matt and Alex will be along with the Late Night Gamecock Show, which is now on podcast form. So go rate it 5 stars and subscribe. It's JC Shurburtt's Coffee. Great talking with you folks this morning. Holla at you soon. JC and Mad Dog Mully.